Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad to have you with us for the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We're going to be talking about the Canadian elections in just a moment. We'll also be talking about losing an F-18 off the Harry S. Truman aircraft carrier off the coast of Yemen. And we are also going to be talking about the PELOSI Act, which is hilarious in an effort to stop members from being able to do stock trades and potential insider trading. But Jim, we, of course, ahead of the curve, always did our Trump 100 Days special on Friday. Today's the actual day. I'm sure you're watching every breathless commentary, column, interview from every possible person trying to assess it when we already did it flawlessly last week.
Only on the Three Martini Lunch do you get the 100-day review on day, 96, 97, something like that.
Right.
I'd also point out, listen, I've seen people referring to it today. I've seen people referring to it as Wednesday. I guess the big question is, do you count Inauguration Day as a full day of the Trump presidency? I think obviously you do, considering how many, he got carpal tunnel from signing all those executive orders.
Yeah.
But then there's the question of, do you count daylight savings time? And by jumping forward, did he lose an hour of his presidency that he will get back later in the fall? So it's very complicated calculations, but we're 100 days-ish today.
That would be hilarious, because if they tried to push it so that it was permanent daylight saving time, he would actually lose an hour between the start of his presidency and the end of it.
That just killed that idea.
That's right.
Veto.
When was the last time you needed to go to a doctor, but you pushed it off? We've all been there. We're all busy. You really don't want to go. You're not sure if whatever the reason you're considering going to the doctor is worth the time, the money, the inconvenience. Figure it'll probably get better on its own. We've all been there, and booking a doctor appointment can really feel daunting, especially have to wait forever on the phone. But thanks to ZocDoc, there's no reason to delay. They make it so easy to find and book a doctor who's right for you.
As I mentioned in a previous podcast, I used ZocDoc to find an optometrist who was like almost a stone's throw from my house. So you go looking on there. You never know when you'll find somebody who's really convenient. We're talking about booking in-network appointments with more than 100,000 doctors across every specialty, from mental health to dental health, from primary care to urgent care, everything you could possibly need. And you can filter for doctors who take your insurance, are located nearby, are a good fit for any medical need you may have, and are highly rated by verified patients.
ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and then click to instantly book an appointment. You don't have to wait on the phone for anyone. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/3ML to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/3ML, ZocDoc.com/3ML. All right, Jim, Monday was election day in Canada, and this is the election that the Conservative Party had been waiting for a very long, almost 5 years up there in Canada. And 4 months ago, it looked like it was going to be one of the greatest triumphs in the history of the Conservative Party. In fact, projections for the parliamentary elections back at the very first of the year, just before Justin Trudeau announced his resignation, the estimate was that the Conservative Party would win roughly 240 seats in Parliament. They only needed 172 to have a majority without any sort of coalition. By the time we got to the 1st of March, it was down to a 177 to 120 projection for the Conservative Party, so just a few seats beyond the majority. And now, even since then, because of the beginning of April tariffs and everything else that's happened, the Liberal Party all of a sudden was projected to win, and in some cases win big. That did not happen, but they did get the most seats. They'll get the chance to form the government. Most likely they'll be able to do it. And so the fight now proceeds, Jim. A lot of folks believe that Pierre Poilievre would have been a great prime minister and a good partner to Trump, and if Trump had just kept the powder dry on tariffs and mocking Canada, maybe beyond that one tweet after Trudeau came and left from Mar-a-Lago, that this could have been a really good relationship. But as a result of the tariffs and the continued talk about the 51st state, that turned everything up in Canada towards the Liberals. And even though Poilievre did not agree with what Trump was doing on either of those things, he and his party pay the price. And so now there's this fight among folks on the right in our own country about where the blame goes. You got folks like Guy Benson saying After the Liberals dumped toxic Trudeau, Trump's tariffs and insulting 51st state trolling arrived like manna from heaven for the ruling leftist party. They made the election all about fighting tariffs and Trump, pivoting away from all the reasons they were set to lose. It worked. A massive reversal and an outside influence catastrophe for the Conservatives. A fourth straight term for the Liberals. Awful. But Mark Thiessen over at AEI and Fox News says if Canadians are so foolish that they let Trump hatred convince them to give Liberals a disastrous fourth term, then they have no one to blame but themselves. And they re-elected Trudeau after he made Canada the most locked down country in the world long before Trump returned. Pathetic excuse for a country. So, Jim, I think it's safe to say that the Conservatives probably would have won without what we've seen from Trump over the past few months. But do the Canadian voters really deserve the blame here? How do you shake this out?
First of all, Greg, this is going to make the ongoing series between the Washington Capitals and the Montreal Canadiens even more intense. It's now a stand-in for that intense rivalry. Yeah, the only good news here, and we kind of look for the silver linings where we can, is we won't have Justin Trudeau's pretty face to kick around anymore. How do you think he's no longer in office and hiding up into probably a very lucrative retirement? You think he's celebrated with a Cuba Libre cocktail, Greg?
And a stogie.
Like 80% of our listeners got that joke. So yeah, like Poilievre, we had played the audio of him eating the apple and brushing off these ludicrously biased questions from a liberal reporter, and he just seemed look. Pierre Poilievre would have a lot more in common on policy than Mark Carney would. And I think it was a little frustrating that nobody could seem to get through to Trump that whatever beef you have with Canada, which I believe actually includes Canadian beef as well, is the argument, like could you back burner it for a little while just so we can get a conservative guy in there? Because the moment you start bashing Canada, well, how do you expect Canadians to respond? Everybody's proud of their country. Everybody's patriotic about their country. And it wasn't even like, arguing about softwood lumber and let's face it, compared to almost every other country on the planet, the, U.S. policy disagreements with Canada are really small, right? It really comes down to what do we call ham? Because they keep insisting it's Canadian bacon. It's regular ham. I don't understand why. It's not the same as American bacon, but fine, whatever. That basically we're talking really small ball differences. And not only did Donald Trump act like, Canada had wronged us in some great and fundamental way, he kept jokingly referring to Justin Trudeau as a governor and making jokes about annexing Canada. And like, how do you think Canadians are going to respond to that? There are, the number of Canadians who like the idea of being annexed, the number of Canadians who like the idea of U.S. treating it as a U.S. state in waiting, they hate that. And it put Poilievre in just this impossible spot where he had to stand up for his country. He had to argue against Trump. He had to basically, up until then, his strong relationship with the U.S. was going to be a big part of his foreign policy. He was going to be more hawkish and more supportive of us on the world stage. Well, once Trump comes in, he can't do that. So, Trump picked his priorities here, and he really enjoyed making fun of Canada. And as a result of it, he's now got a Canadian government that's going to be more opposed to his agenda for the next 4 to 5 years. Great job, Mr. President. I hope it was worth it for you, because I think we'll be paying the price in terms of actual policy fights for a good couple of years now.
I think I know the answer to this, but why do you think they punished the Conservatives here? It's not like Poilievre was siding with Trump in this. Is it because he was promising to have a more robust relationship, or do you just instinctively defend the guy who's currently in office in that party because that's who's the target of the incoming verbal barrage?
There is that rally around the flag effect. And I also just think, secondly, between the left-wing party and the right-wing party, which one do you think is going to have a better relationship with a U.S. Republican president? And or which one do you think is more likely to reflexively stand up and oppose a U.S. Republican president? And that appears to be the case here. And I am my sympathies go out there for all Canadian conservatives. Yes, they exist. I'm not going to reuse the joke about holding their meetings in a phone booth. It's actually quite a few out in the West, but they just don't have the numbers in a normal set of circumstances. Now, you also know that, Canada has its own version of the pendulum effect, where it's very hard to stay in power for a lot of consecutive terms, but the Liberal Party managed to do it 4 straight terms now. And that's really frustrating for Canada's conservatives. It's not going to move them in the right direction on policy in a bunch of directions. And it's, in terms of U.S. priorities, this is entirely a self-inflicted wound on the part of the Trump administration.
Yeah, it feels like an own goal. And just to clarify, it's not because we're focused that much on candidates. It's because we feel that a Poilievre or a conservative government would be much better for the United States, would have much more common ground, like Jim said. And so Poilievre had been saying all throughout the campaign, this is our last chance to get it right, or Canada's really headed down the drain here because of the housing crisis, the soaring cost of everything that the Liberals have inflicted. And so it's not going to get better because Mark Carney is no less far left than Justin Trudeau. I'll tell you what is great, though. Fatty 15, especially if you want to not feel so rough in the morning. As you get older, are you noticing that your sleep's not quite as good? Maybe low energy, Jeb Bush, or stiff joints? Maybe even some more serious health concerns. That's because aging is personal and we feel it in many different ways. But there's now C15 from Fatty 15, and it's the first essential fatty acid to be discovered in more than 90 years. It's an incredible scientific breakthrough to support our long-term health and wellness, and you guessed it, aging and longevity.
Developed with U.S. Navy doctors, Fatty 15 uses pure, bioavailable C15 to repair age-related cell damage. It also protects against future breakdowns and supports your body's natural repair systems. And you'll see fast, visible results. 72% of users report improvements in sleep, mood, energy, joint comfort, heart, liver, and metabolic health within just 16 weeks.
Fatty 15 is on a mission to optimize your C15 levels to help you live healthier and longer. You can get an additional 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit by going to fatty15.com/3ml and use the code 3ml at checkout. That's fatty15, the number 15, fatty15.com/3ml, code 3ml. All right, Jim, on to our second bad martini now. And for that, we head to the Morning Jolt, but also a story out of the Middle East. We had talked not that long ago about the effectiveness of the U.S. campaign against the Houthis. And now we've got some more details, both in what we've lost and some of the damage that we are inflicting. CNN reporting, as you linked to in the Jolt, saying that a U.S. Navy FA-18 Super Hornet fighter jet has been lost at sea after it fell overboard from the USS Harry S. Truman aircraft carrier while it was being towed on board, the Navy said on Monday. So a U.S. official said initial reports from the scene indicated the Truman made a hard turn to evade Houthi fire, which contributed to the fighter jet falling overboard. Yemen's Houthi rebels claimed on Monday to have launched a drone and missile attack on the aircraft carrier, which is in the Red Sea, as part of the U.S. military's major operation against the Iran-backed group. But as you also point out in the Jolt, Jim, at least according to U.S. Central Command, there have been a significant number of accomplishments in this military mission, killing hundreds of Houthi fighters, numerous Houthi leaders, including senior Houthi missile and drone officials. They've also destroyed multiple command and control facilities, air defense systems, advanced weapons, manufacturing facilities, and much more. So thankfully, no people have been harmed yet on our side. So what do we take from all this?
So, Greg, the first thing is I kind of marvel at how little we hear about U.S. operations against the Houthis in Yemen day to day, week to week. I know it's a busy news cycle. I know the Trump administration is moving in a million different directions simultaneously, and I get it. It's a busy news cycle, but I feel like you hear almost nothing about it unless something like this happens. I don't remember that scene in Top Gun Maverick, but have you ever seen the footage of aircraft carriers with all those jets on the deck lined up very precisely, and you've ever wondered, wow, how do they do that without them ever going over the edge? Well, apparently they can. And apparently, I think what is really disturbing about this is that you think of an aircraft carrier, usually we envision it being big and slow, but actually they can turn relatively quickly, and apparently the deck can tilt up to 15 degrees when it's making one of these evasive maneuvers. Houthis were firing at the ship. They were doing this. Now, there's no indication that the Houthi fire came terribly close to it, but apparently that was enough for the tilt to get the plane to go out of control, fell over the deck. That is, and oh, by the way, these planes go about 60 million a pop. As far as I know, Jake from State Farm does not insure them, so we're out that cost. And then we'd heard a bit about the drones. I went and checked. The Houthis have shot down 7 over the course of this operation, including 3 in a week, which feels like a lot. And I try to dig into this in the Jolt. I talk about news that did not get the attention that I feel like it really deserves. Last week, the U.S. officials had said that a Chinese company, and let's face it, it's not state-owned, but it's got ties to the PLA. It's basically state-influenced, shall we say. that they were helping the Houthis with their strikes by giving them satellite stuff. And I did more digging into them. Apparently, these are really good satellites. There's apparently 117 of them. The detail in the images is really good. Each pixel is about less than 2 feet. They can cover more than 770,000 square miles in a day. So let's say you're a Houthi drone operator and you want to know where a U.S. aircraft carrier is or other U.S. ships are or commercial ships or anything you want to target. Apparently, these satellites are really good for knowing where something is, which if you're wondering why, this is in addition to reports the Russians had helped them with their targeting, that the Chinese, through this country, and obviously the Iranians are sending every possible piece of equipment they can to the Houthis. In addition, my sense of this is under-discussed and under-analyzed in the U.S. media. Look, we're not just fighting the Houthis. We are effectively fighting the technology, at least, of the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians. And I feel like the stakes of this are significantly higher. And you're wondering, how are they shooting down the Reaper drones so frequently? I kind of figure it's the technology they're getting from these other countries that I characterize as part of the axis of the devils, a loose affiliation of hostile states that are out to screw us over whenever they can. So, I think this is a big deal. I feel like we should be getting more discussion of this. I kind of conclude the jolt by saying people have probably noticed that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has not had the best couple news cycles these past couple of days. And I just there's a reason. There's a brief statement put out by U.S. Central Command updating a couple of days ago. They said they'd done more than 800 airstrikes. And that's great. I kind of miss the Norman Schwarzkopf during the Persian Gulf or Rumsfeld during Iraq and Afghanistan. These regular updates with video and charts and maps and demonstrating where the U.S. operations are going. Nobody wants to disclose anything that shouldn't be disclosed. Don't disclose sources and methods. Don't disclose any operational details. But I just kind of feel like that would do Hegseth and the Trump administration some good, and also emphasize to the public the importance of what's being done for the Houthis, against the Houthis, and what's being done for the whole world to restore that shipping lane through the Red Sea. And I just kind of feel like something really important things are happening, and it's not getting nearly the attention it deserves. Some of that's the media's fault, but I also feel like the administration could be doing a lot more to communicate what's going on out there and the importance of it.
The media is clearly not interested, so that's part of it. Why do you think the administration's not interested in getting more out there? They got this statement from CENTCOM, but you're right, there haven't been any major briefings.
I'm a little surprised, and I looked through both Secretary Hegseth's Twitter account, X, the posts there, and the DoD Rapid Response account. And there's a lot of bashing of Democratic members of Congress. There's a lot of, let's say, very Trumpian, pugnacious picking of fights with critics of the administration. And I know that's something that interests Trump. I know that's kind of the persona of this administration, and I'm not going to begrudge them their right to do that. But I don't think that's the only public communications job of the Pentagon. And I kind of feel like informing the American public about what the U.S. military forces are doing. You can find this stuff out there. And I found a lot of this stuff over in international media. So I don't think this stuff is classified. I think you can put together a good detailed briefing that would get people's attention. And I kind of feel like it would get people talking more about what the Pentagon Department of Defense is doing and much less about who leaked about who in Hegseth's office and is it chaos and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of feel like it's a missed opportunity, and I kind of urge them to jump into this. I just think it right now is, there's an argument, people say, oh, the public doesn't care. Well, if you don't offer it to them, how do you know if they don't care?
No, the media is not off the hook for that because they could be trying to report on it. And that would probably actually prompt more briefings if there was a steady drumbeat and demand for details. But yes, the administration needs to provide the details as well, because clarity is good. Clarity is important, and the truth is important for all of us to know. And that's also true in the classroom. And a lot of schools, you're not getting that, especially when it comes to economics. Big time left-wing tilt. Socialism is great. Capitalism is evil, of course, when the opposite is naturally true. But over at Hillsdale College, I can promise you from my own experience and more than 180 years of existence, capitalism is treated with the respect that it deserves at Hillsdale College. And now you can enroll in a free online course entitled Understanding Capitalism.
In fact, Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses. That's right, free. You can learn about the U.S. Constitution, the stories from the book of Genesis, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, or the history of the ancient Christian church with Hillsdale College's free online courses.
In this 7-part series on understanding capitalism, you'll learn about the role of profit and loss, the role that human nature plays in economics, why capitalism depends on private property rights, the rule of law, and freedom, and why capitalism encourages morality, not undermining it. So go right now to hillsdale.edu/martini to enroll in this course, Understanding Capitalism. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. hillsdale.edu/martini to enroll for free. All right, Jim, on to our final martini now. Definitely some good here, but also a little bit of crazy. Points for cleverness on the bill title here from Missouri Senator Josh Hawley. Not usually a fan of tortured acronyms to make the point and how they title these things, but Daily Wire with the story here. Senator Josh Hawley reintroduced the Anti-Corruption PELOSI Act on Friday, aiming to ban members of Congress from trading individual stocks, and President Trump signaled he would sign such legislation into law. PELOSI stands for Preventing Elected Leaders from Owning Securities and Investments, and is named after former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, whose husband has drawn scrutiny for millions in suspected insider trading. Quote, members of Congress should be fighting for the people they were elected to serve, not day trading at the expense of their constituents, said Hawley. Americans have seen politician after politician turn a profit using information not available to the general public. It's time we ban all members of Congress from trading and holding stocks and restore Americans' trust in our nation's legislative body. The legislation would still allow investment in broader financial instruments such as mutual funds, ETFs, and treasury bonds. The bill does provide a 6-month grace period for compliance after enactment. And again, Trump says he would sign it. And so, Jim, it's awfully curious. We've seen some of these instances where people have kind of gotten caught red-handed with insider trading. We saw some people making some major shifts in the early stages of the COVID pandemic. Nancy Pelosi has made a mint. There was even a 60 Minutes profile on that. Steve Kroft, I remember having to ask a question at a briefing and Nancy acting like there was absolutely nothing wrong. How could you possibly ever question me on this? So my thought is it's a good piece of legislation and would remove an ethical cloud and probably make terms shorter in Congress if they knew they couldn't make as much money. But I also don't think you're going to get it passed. Have many Democrats getting on board if you call it the Pelosi Act. So how do you see it?
So if it gets to the Senate, they'll rename it. That's, very often you and I will roll our eyes at the Freedom Act or some other really tortured acronym to create this one. Okay, well played, guys. A little clever there. I'm a little depressed that we need this legislation. Look, we've had members of Congress for a long time. We've had members of Congress, members of Congress know this bill's likely to pass, this bill's not likely to pass. And generally, they've not been rushing out to call their brokers to make the types of moves in order to benefit from this, having this knowledge of how government policy is likely to be altered, or this intelligence briefing indicates we could be heading into hostilities. Time to put my money into Northrop Grumman and all the defense contractors I can, because the Pentagon's going to be placing a whole bunch of new orders for planes and bombs and stuff like that. But apparently we need this rule anymore. Apparently we can't trust them. Apparently they cannot be trusted with, to not use their public offices to benefit themselves. It's actually ironically been a crusade of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Broken clocks can be right twice a day. She can be right on this one. I think it was, remember there was talk that she and Ted Cruz were going to team up on this, which was, the most unlikely combination you could possibly imagine there. I would like to see something like this happen. For a long time, presidents would put their money into a blind trust. Basically the idea of most presidents were already pretty darn wealthy. And they would say, I am not making a decision about my wealth and my holdings. If somebody else wants to buy and sell, put money into companies, sell shares of a company, that's fine. I'm usually picking a trusted friend, but I'm not going to talk to this friend about my investments for the next 4 years. And I'll just assume that by the time I finish my presidency, they'll have done a good job of managing my money. In almost every single case they did, things worked out fine. Nobody had to worry about this. Trump did not do that. And at the time, he had a fairly strong argument that, there's certain things you could do, for stocks, you don't know what you own. For other things like Trump hotels, everybody kind of knows that he owns it. I remember there were issues of foreign governments spending a lot of money at Trump's hotel in Washington, D.C., and arguments about whether that violated the emoluments clause, which was, not only difficult to understand, but also difficult to pronounce. But nonetheless, it's one of those things where we now have had just too many cases in which people make, moves right before some big, policy change is announced. It ends up stocks going up really high, and it's not. And Pelosi was a particularly bad, egregious example of this. Cute to put her name in there. I think you're right that at some point, if this ever becomes a law, it's going to get a different name. And I'd hate to see a good law get, not go anywhere, not pass the Senate, because its name is seen as a shot at a particularly Democratic leader that Democrats won't want to vote for.
Good idea. Pelosi deserves every bit of the mockery here. But yes, if you want to get it done, you're going to need a few Democrats, especially on the Senate side. So, unfortunately, this is nothing new. Peter Schweitzer has written about this and done very well, exposing the Clintons and the Bidens and others over the years. There are many others, both sides of the aisle. We've seen Republicans go to jail for this kind of stuff back in the day. Speaking of Top Gun, Duke Cunningham, almost 20 years ago now, and others. But hopefully this gets done. And yes, it covers members and spouses, but I'm just wondering if, my daughter made a mint or my son made a mint and that kind of thing. So can you actually ever fully stop it? I don't know, but it's at least a worthy effort. And so hopefully it passes. So Jim, have a good day. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast if you don't already, and tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a great Tuesday. Join us again Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.